Yeah, we're going to record
Okay.
for our for the people who can't make it. Put it on our RONA site. So Nicole, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah. You want to jump right in? Absolutely.
Oh, I think are you gonna, who's doing slideshows?
I'm going to.
Okay, so let me make you co-host. I think I have to do that. There you go. In order for you to do a slideshow.
Okay, so yeah. So I'm going to jump in, and I have with me, Heidi is actually out. You might remember Heidi was with me here in May at our meeting. And, but I have instead, so I'm Nicole Burnham, a Deputy Director with Department of Parks, Recreation and Neighborhood Services. I have with me Eve Zudi.
Okay.
And you'll see him in a couple of minutes. And Jeff actually is going to guest host from Hawaii in his hotel room. And we have a fairly, it's about 25 slides that we want to walk through, but we thought it was important that we come back and talk to you about kind of the current status of the project. We also have some conceptual site layouts for you that we're going to walk through that sort of show how wells and park yard might fit in with an overall site plan, pure concepts, but we wanted you to see get an idea about space and how the spaces here might lay out. Jeff's going to walk us through site layout for the wells and how they landed on this location. And then we've got some opportunity for discussion and back and forth. And the other staff member here with us is actually Nicole Harvey, and there may be some others from Jeff's shop, but we've got a few people from Muni Water here as well. And so Nicole, you may see her answering questions. So just to rephrase, I know we all are familiar with the property, but we're in North San Jose. And we wanted to just, redefine again where the San District Unified property is versus our property. We're talking about 21.6 acres of city property, city-owned land. So where are we in the status of developing a park, right? And so we always want park development and construction to go quickly. It never goes as quickly as any of us want. So you can see we have a multi-phase plan here laid out, right? And we're in phase 3, kind of step 3 of the status of park development. Our initial phase was about coordination. We partnered with the school district. We continue to partner with the school district about the site and things that are happening there. We worked with the school district to acquire the property from the state of California. The city on our park property has started remediation, which includes demolition of the building and remediation of environmental hazards associated with the building. There are also future phases of remediation that you'll see us move through, which may include addressing contaminants in soils. We know the school found naturally occurring asbestos in the soils and on their site, so we suspect we'll find the same things we'll need to deal with. And then from there, we move into the fun stuff, right? Where we start into concept planning and master planning and design and construction. But the intent here is just to level set all of us on the idea that park development, and especially for a site this large, it's a multi-phase process that happens over a period of time. And so, as I mentioned, we're still in that first remediation / demolition phase. So I know a lot of you are curious about this phase of work. It is about 50% complete. We started the demolition and were asked by EPA and DTSC to evaluate the buildings more deeply than we had initially for environmental contaminants. So there are 6 buildings that still remain on the site. We are in the process of having EPA review the work plan and testing protocol for demolition of the remaining structures. And just, they ask us to monitor things like air quality and just how we handle the material, both when it's on site as well as where it goes for disposal. Those are all things that are in EPA review. We expect that we'll resume site work for the demolition in 2022. I think, as many of you know, the school development has progressed. The southern end of the site will have its ribbon cutting this week. And I think we have Michelle here tonight. She can talk more about that if folks have questions. But the south end of the site will have its ribbon cutting and we'll see students this fall. The north end of the site will continue into construction. And our site kind of, as you can see from this graphic, really dovetails into theirs, right? So the school district's been working on this whole western side of the site. North is up here. This is Zenker Road. And our site is kind of tucked in the back there and kind of surrounded in large part by the school district. So they have been moving along and moving forward, and we will dovetail with them as we move forward as well. So what do we think about when we think here about park development? There's a lot, as you all know. I don't need to tell you because you live here, but there's a lot about this site that is exciting. There's a lot of opportunity here. It is significant acreage. 21.6 acres will be one of the largest parks we have in our system. It's a very, very large site, particularly for something that will be tucked into a neighborhood. It doesn't happen often that we acquire sites this large. The North San Jose location is really strategic, both for us and parks, but for the city in general, right? As property ownership, for us to have park resources here is really important, especially as North San Jose development continues to occur. And unlock some pretty high density that's going to happen up here. And this really presents the opportunity for a central hub for park and recreation resources in North San Jose. So some things that we think about as we think about developing this park are, what do we want for the community and what do we hope you're going to want as we program the space? Diversity of experiences. And Eve's going to show you some examples of what that might look like as he moves into his slides. But there's a lot of opportunity here for us to have a lot of different types of park assets, from active play to community center to programming, outdoor amphitheater space. So there's a lot of opportunity. We know, and we have heard from the community, and we don't expect this is going to change, that the community wants us to be a community facility, right? A space where there's programs and resources available for the community. We also hope, and this goes back to the idea of a park yard, and we will talk with you about that this evening, but that we can improve PRNS service up in North San Jose, in part by using some of this site, and we'll talk more about that. Now, as I mentioned, it's a large site, 21.6 acres, significantly larger than any other parks you have in North San Jose. So just giving you comparison, Riverview, 5.5 acres, River Oaks, 5.5 acres, Iris Chang, 2.7 acres. So those are, we feel like from a PRNS perspective, these are significant North San Jose assets that exist. And this site, the Agnews site, will dwarf those. They will continue to serve, of course, certainly, but the opportunity for the 21.6 acres is significant. It also is a highly visible location with its adjacency to the future school and the perimeter roadways that exist around the area. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eve Zudi, Division Manager with PRNS, and he's going to talk you through some of the concepts that we have.
Thank you, Nicole, and good evening, everyone. I wanted to first talk about the idea of a concept and a master plan. We often use these terms, and I want to make sure we're all clear on it. The idea of a concept is very early on type work. We enter a site, we just start thinking what could happen here, how much space is available, what are the uses, and often these are conversations we'll draw the community in for some input. But this is just helping us get a sense of what could be possible as we do more research. And a master plan is something we would do in future years with you as members of the community, where we get into the details of the park. We know what are the assets that are going to be there, how much space is required, what things work well together, what things don't work well together. So we might have greater separation within the park if we have some uses like that. But that's a more formal process with environmental documents that help us guide future design of the project. So sometimes we'll talk about a master plan and people say, well, that sounds like you've got a plan, go out and build it. We still have to actually do engineering drawings so that a contractor could see specifically what to bid and build for us. Next slide, Nicole.
Isn't that interesting? It knows I stopped speaking apparently and is
Oh,
not letting me. One
And-
moment. I'll be right back.
okay.
Sorry, everybody.
And it was fun to conceptually think about this site because there is so much room and so much opportunity. So we'll start here. So before I show you the concepts, I wanted to give you a sense of what we'd like to fit into the space. And again, the space we're looking at is on the right-hand graphic. It's the upper right side. And there is 21.2 acres. So the boxes to the left are just assumptions on how much space we might want to allocate to different uses. When we say community, we're talking about a community center and its parking lot, and potentially it's a library or other uses. Play would be features that I'll show you with images, but that's, you know, the traditional playful part of the park where you go kick a ball and have that activity. Gathering is those more quiet spaces, or a place where you create a signature image for the park where people say that park has a lot of character because there's something there. Active would be sports fields, like soccer or baseball. Nature would be an area of focus that we really want to pay more attention to as a department. We've made it one of our 5 pillars of our strategic plan to really do a better job at preserving and celebrating the beautiful landscapes we have locally. And then 1.5 acres of that 21.5 acres is land we want to allocate to a park yard. And then I'll put it in context. When I show you these concepts, keep in mind that the green part isn't well rendered or isn't rendered to such detail in the graphics that we have an additional 6.7 acres of land that we haven't even thought about. So there's lots of flexibility for imagination, creative thinking. And then for context, so it's important that we're out here in the North San Jose area. The graphic here shows you our service yards. We've got a lot of service yards managed by the department in the central and downtown area of San Jose. So we can get to parks in this area quickly. We're not spending a lot of time commuting. We've got places to keep resources, soil, mulch, equipment, and staff is doing work rather than driving. South San Jose, we've got one service yard. It's pretty thin. North San Jose, we don't have a service yard at all. And I'm sure you're all aware of traffic in the North San Jose area. I know when I've got a meeting in the Alviso area first thing in the morning, I'm adding an hour and 15 to travel time, and it just eats into the day. And so strategically, it will work well for us in that we're making better and more efficient use of staff time, but it's also better for the community. So River Oaks and Iris Chang and Alviso Park and all of these important features in the area will have greater and quicker attention.
Is it okay if Mike asks a question? He'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, please do, Mike.
Yeah, I understand the process that you're laying out. Totally makes sense. We appreciate it. One of the concerns we have is the water department pushing so far out ahead of your design work and kind of claiming some of the space. And there not really being a tight coordination about where they're going to claim that space and what impact that might have on the park. So there's a timing thing here we're concerned about as a community.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And I'll have Jeff speak in just a moment. And I think you'll see we've come up with some, I think a clever way to accommodate something that's important for this park and also a resource to the neighborhood. In this first concept, we worked around the spaces, and we think as you come through on Center Road, you'd pass by a gathering space to the upper left, which would be your entry, your visible entry, but then you reach the community center and parking space. And we've shown a 65,000 square foot community center building here. That is huge. For comparison, Nicole, you'll have to remind me, what do we have at like Almaden or Bascom?
Almaden is 40,000 square feet.
Yeah, so
combined bit. So this is enough space for a combined library and community center, if that's what we wanted to do.
Can I ask a question about how you decide this? I know this is all conceptual, but what I mean, are you just laying it out because these are just blocks and you're sticking them in there, or why do you say that the park yard and the community center and the parking are what we would call the back of the park? Like, people in the neighborhood would have to walk through the entire park to get to these facilities versus starting down where you have the nature area, or you know, where you're going to have like 5,000 units that can access. So I'm just curious, is this just this is where the pieces fit, or is there something that you are thinking for the reason why it would be laid out that way versus another way?
Most of this is entirely flexible.
Okay.
And our purpose tonight was to show you how much space we have and how much we can accomplish in this area, and show you some representative images of things we have in our portfolio that work here. The few things though that we think we're tending towards having fixed are the 3 well sites and the park yard. Although, you know, with feedback, we can definitely move. Nothing is set in stone at this point, but conceptually it makes sense.
That was my next question, was the well sites in stone versus everything else, or is it just, you know, because for us, we see the well sites as being more towards where the residents are and less towards commercial. So like where you have the community center building and the parking is, to us, as far away from the residents as you can get, versus where you have it now, which is closer to the residents. And you have the community center and the parking as, I'm more concerned about the community center than parking, because I imagine we would all walk. So you have it farther. Now I understand there's considerations for roads and such, but it was my understanding that the diagonal boundary is the boundary with the school parking lot. So I'm curious as to why. I mean, because that kind of pins that surrounds the park with parking versus, I know that the public won't have access to the school parking, but it's still the feel that you would have is a parking lot on at least 2 sides, as well as the park yard.
I think those are great comments for sure. And it's something that we're aware of, and we've had conversations with Michelle, and I think, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, you know, what we're city and district are thinking is, you know, as we move forward, we will work more closely with them and figure out like what's the best parking arrangement for the site and how do those 2 sites work together. I think Eve is right. You know, we wanted to show some blocks of space here just to convey that we think even with the park yards and wells, we think there's a lot of space here for the community's needs to be met. One thing I will say, I think, you know, and these are very much just like, okay, for, you know, a block the size of a community center, how does it fit on the site? But to your point, yes, and your questions, yes, that community center could be in the nature area by the time we're done. Those are the things we would talk about during master plan. And one really important thing we need to think about here too is that we may find that there is some amount of contaminated soils on this site. The school district had a number of contamination issues on their site. We may find them on ours, and quite frankly, contamination may drive where some of these things go, right? Like if we can, you know, if we find contaminated soils and need to put them under a parking lot, we might want to put the parking lot near where the contaminated soils are, you know, like there's some things about the existing site condition that may drive where we place things, but we before we have that specific conversation about exactly where things go, we're going to want to do a little bit more investigation into the site. So tonight is really just about like, here's the big picture of what can fit there.
Right.
Everything can shift in the future. I think what we would lockdown, and I'll leave Jeff to talk about this later, but the, you know, the well sites, I'm not sure what there is for flexibility on the well sites, but maybe we can talk about that when we get into talking more detail about the wells.
I have a question. The nature, you had area, you had mentioned about a bio retention pond. Is that where is that where you might put that in the nature?
I think we'll talk about that when we get to the nature section.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you,
Go
Nicole.
ahead.
And if you see my eyes shifting, it's because I'm recording notes of everything you're saying. So next time we meet, you'll see even more improvements here. I wanted to talk about the active area, which is to the right-hand side of the site. And active is sports courts, pickleball is becoming very popular, tennis, of course, fitness areas. And because these are paved areas, that might also be another opportunity if we have some contaminated soil to deal with. And the way we set this up was that they're around the well site in this area, because if there's walls, that might also be actually an attribute to an active play site.
And we also knew that there's concern from the wells about noise. And so then it becomes, you know, logical to put activities that aren't noise sensitive, like basketball or tennis, activities that might generate their own noise near the wells. We don't believe they'll generate excessive noise, but if that were to be a problem, then these are activities that wouldn't be impacted by that.
Then on nature, this is something we really want to start focusing more on in our parks, and it can be to support birds. Bees are struggling. Nicole and I were commiserating that we can't seem to get tomatoes this year, so we're on board for more bees. But they're also, it doesn't mean that these are forbidden spaces. People can enjoy them, but it's going to be more of a passive space you walk through, or you enjoy a view rather than kick a ball. And again, this space can be moved around. And when we talk about storm water basins, capturing that storm water, it could happen in nature. It could be part of a beautiful meadow kind of scene. But again, we have 6.7 acres of the underlying green space, which is maybe where we want to be directing water off of the active play or the play fields or the gathering sites. It really comes into the engineering and the architecture of this park once we know more. In the play area, this is the central area where you're going to see a lot of kids. It's open space. It can have fields striped for play, a lot of activities like that. It can have ping pong and futsal and playgrounds for sure. And we're committed to all-inclusive play and projects like that. So if you know the Rotary Playground at the Guadalupe River Park, we'd be looking at building a great destination playground here as well. For the gathering spaces, this is, I think, where you'll find the heart of the park. And this, to your input that we've heard so far, this is where we want to think really seriously about where is the central gathering place, and where is the place where you're going to find a sense of what this neighborhood is about. And we're showing imagery of places to gather, maybe have a movie night, watch performances, or just places that are comfortable and different than the typical park bench. It's a place you like to go hang out because it's more interesting and creative. There's so many opportunities in these types of gathering spaces, but they're intended to serve the population who doesn't go to a park to play tennis or kick a ball, and you just want to go hang out and be with friends and have your backyard. If you're living in a place with maybe a small yard or a balcony, this becomes your backyard. Now on the park yard, we're showing 1.53 acres of that space, and you'll see that the blue boxes show that 2 of the well sites are incorporated into the yard. So they're in a way camouflaged within that space. And a park yard is vital for us because it's the office space where the park managers, the park supervisors, and their teams gather in the morning, get orientated, figure out what the priorities are, and go service the area. They'll keep equipment there, mowers and trucks and lifts and all sorts of things you need to keep our parks looking great. Vehicle parking for their own vehicles, as well as the vehicles they would use to do their field work, and the material storage, which could be gravel and mulch and topsoil, all those resources that are a real burden to deal with if you've got to go down to South San Jose and pick them up to bring them back here. Next.
Sorry,
We found a technical challenge.
this is interesting.
We have another question here from Richard Santos.
Okay. Hi,
Yes.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, hi to everybody. And Mr. Provenzano taking his time off Hawaii to meet with us. This is pretty nice. When I ask questions, it's not anything negative. I think parks are fantastic. But when you go to a subject, if you wouldn't mind, because I believe you talked about maintenance, and then all of a sudden you get your 4 phases down the road. So if you maybe ask when someone made a statement like, Gene, is there any more questions? Then go to the next subject. So going to maintenance, what I thought I heard you say was that like in Alviso Park, we want a place closer because when we have to go out and give services, it takes a long time due to traffic. So that's what my concern. What I don't understand is you have 2,600 acres over there at the San Jose water treatment plant. Why can't a maintenance yard be there and not use valuable space in that park that could be used for other things other than maintenance? There's no question that you need maintenance and so on. I go back to the years ago in Mayberry Yard that we used to have maintenance in the fire service, and I can go on and on. And those days are numbered because before you guys' time, they used to have a maintenance yard on Taylor Street. And then the public came in and they had to move it to another place. And they used to have an old firehouse. And just like in Mayberry, you're probably going to have to end up moving that place when all the housing gets built. So what I'm saying is, when you're having maintenance for parks, I understand it. But why wouldn't you use the 2,600 acres out there? You got enough land to build another city. You have a maintenance yard there that can serve your Agnews property as well as Alviso and other places. So that's going to be the future anyway. That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm not against any of this stuff. I'm trying to understand it. I think it's fantastic to have a park, community center. These are things that when Gene and Marla was on the task force, this was all discussed. And so many of these issues during this building of Agnew wasn't discussed till now. That's what it's kind of hard for me to understand. That's why sometimes we get negative action because people feel, wow, why didn't we say it then? Because I attended those meetings also, and it was always listening to be supportive. So let's go back. Why would you put a maintenance yard there to lose valuable space for the community and residents when you have property that is enough room to build another city?
You know, Eve, do you want to?
And that's only a mile
Please go
away.
ahead, Nicole.
Okay, Dick, I think you bring up a really good point, and it's something we can look at. We've been looking at that space at the treatment plant for a while, right? Because we've had people talking to us about different park uses there. At this point, environmental services on the wastewater side, right? Jeff's on potable water, but we have the wastewater side. They don't have a schedule for when they'll turn that property over to us. And so that's unclear. So I think it's something from a maintenance perspective we can think about and we can evaluate. I think we've got a few years, that was kind of the timeline I laid out. We have a few years before we're going to be building, a yard out here. So from a maintenance perspective, I think PRNS can look at that. I think I need Jeff to, and he's got a couple of slides coming up here, but or if he wants to jump in now, I don't know that they have as much flexibility.
Nicole, there's a maintenance yard there now. All you do is just put the equipment there. That's what I don't understand. Again, I'm never negative.
Yeah.
I thank all you guys. I think this is great planning. You're working hard for the people to have a park. It's wonderful. Because I got 54 years out there and I'll be still waiting to finish a park. But that ain't the issue.
Mhm.
The issue is you have opportunity and you have maintenance yards there now that serves 7 cities.
Yeah, I know. And I
the,
do.
the common sense issue is there. To use valuable land, that's what I question, that's all.
Okay, no, and that's a valid comment. And I think something we can explore more.
Thank you.
We're not as familiar with that yet, but yeah, we're happy to look at that as we move forward.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
It's in the notes.
I was going to say, similarly, there's a bunch of unused space around the VTA yard. Not already, not already a maintenance yard, but up where they store the buses, there seems to be a chunk of space. I'm not sure what the long-term plan for that is, but you might consider that also. That's only a couple blocks away from the park location we're talking about.
That's at Zanker and 237, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'll put that on our list to take a look at as well.
I also have something. I happen to be reading about the BART coming into San Jose and then going into Santa Clara. And there happens to be, the city owns some land there, and the maintenance facility will be constructed on the former Union Pacific Railroad New Hall Yard that was purchased by the VTA in 2004, located in the cities of San Jose and Santa Clara. And part of it is owned by the city of San Jose, from what I understand, and looking at the diagram. So that could probably be something there too, because it's a northern portion of the New Hall maintenance facility, which is adjacent to the northerly, approximately 1,600 linear feet of the proposed transit guideway. So that might be something too. It's, like I said, the land is owned by the city of San Jose, owned by the city of Santa Clara, and I believe it was also a VTA.
Yeah, well, we'll take a look at it. I think there we've got we're very close to the Asbury yard that Parks and Rec runs and uses it for that central part of downtown. But I have it on our list. We'll take a look at that opportunity as well. I wanted to, I'm sorry, Jean?
Closer to downtown. Did you say it's Brook Hall?
It is.
Yeah, well, this is, it's
Brook Hall Road near Santa Clara Station.
Yeah, it's Brook Hall Road
Oh.
near Santa Clara Station in Santa Clara. So that's where it's located.
Okay, yeah. I heard New Hall. Okay, we'll look at that. Okay, I wanted to show you this. This is a rendering from the park yard study we did to think about how we could configure a yard as efficiently as possible. And things to show you here is that there's a dark gray box to the upper left and a medium-sized gray box to the upper right within the yard, and a third one there on the far right. Those are the proposed well sites. We've worked with Jeff and his team to minimize those footprints. And the two wells we're showing are within the service yard, so next to storage buildings and staff buildings. So we're minimizing the opportunities where these boxes start showing up within the park landscape where we can. And the third just had to have a certain distance, so there was no reason for us to extend parking and service yard operations. So it's going to be an object within the park as we're proposing it right now, or conceptually considering it right now.
The next slide, Eve, sorry.
Okay.
This is pretty wild. I've never had a presentation do this. And I think the next slide is going to fall to Jeff, actually. So
okay.
Does that look familiar, Jeff?
Yes, it does. All right, well, thank you. So changing topics a little bit, we added a couple slides in here. And I know there's some information that was provided in writing prior to the meeting. Hopefully everyone got that. The few slides that we put in here were really to try to, and the talking points I want to get to are try to address why right now and why here. So it's a little bit different from what we were talking about a minute ago on the exact layout, but this is kind of frame up the scenario that we're looking at right now. The water supply and for North San Jose since its inception has been, well, since it's been developed, I should say, has been water that we, your water provider, we have bought from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission called Hetch-Hetchy. And it's never been a concern before. We are a non-permanent and interruptible customer, wholesale customer from San Francisco. And we have always lived under the potential that that water supply could be temporarily or halted permanently ongoing. It hasn't really been a concern up until now. And the reason for that is that there was always adequate water supply on the Tuolumne River that San Francisco had. And they had the infrastructure and the reliability to continue to reliably provide that water that we can then turn around and distribute to the community. That's kind of changed starting in about 2017, and it's been being worked on, but there's something called the Bay Delta Plan that was adopted by the State Water Resources Control Board. And what that plan basically said, and what was enforced just this past year, is that there are, it mandated that there are increased Tuolumne River flows, meaning San Francisco has to let a significant amount of water always go through their dam, so they can't hold it back for us. What that means, obviously, then, is that there's less water supply in drought scenarios. And more specifically for you all, for us and for you, because we're linked together, is what we're being told by San Francisco is that we could see water supply reductions of up to 50% during drought scenarios, which would lead to water rationing in this North San Jose area. So this is all pretty new, considering decades of development, and pretty comfortable that water supply is going to be there. To be told in the past year that in drought scenarios that 50% cutback is very, very possible, and to expect that. It's really causing us to move faster. We always knew adding groundwater wells was something to be worked on, but this really kind of upped the ante for us to go much, much faster, and at least getting something in the ground to protect the community right now. The slide there on the right, you may have seen this perhaps in the news or different presentations. This was, I believe, Nicole, your picture's in the way here. Let me move you. This is from July 27th of this year. This is a drought scenario in California, and it is pretty significant. There is a lot of concern. I know Dick is here too, and he can weigh in some of his perspectives on the Valley Water side. But all the water wholesalers, all the water suppliers are all seeing pretty significant reductions in water supplies throughout the state. And there is a lot of concern right now on what is going to happen in the future. If we get a similar type of no rain scenario like last year, or even just an average, but ongoing, very limited water supplies, that we need to change and adapt. And what that means is doing new infrastructure on the wholesale side, and also new infrastructure with us locally to make sure that we always have water supply there for you. Nicole, can you flip to the next slide? Thank you. Well sites, there's a few animated graphics here, Nicole. If you can just do the first one, thank you. So well sites, there's a lot that goes into well sites, and there's two different discussions for us as your water provider. There are two different discussions happening at the same time. The first one, those blue dots, well, let me back up. The first one is well sites for you all, for our existing community, the existing neighborhoods that we serve. And then there's well sites and water supply for new development. And those are two completely different topics for us. When we have historically, with the thought that San Francisco is pretty reliable as a water supply, over the last maybe 5 years, we've been working with conditioning developments to put in their own, conditioning new developments to set aside land for wells that would serve their own usage. And the point there is that when they hook up and say, oh, give us water now, that they're not taking from water supply that would be serving you all. Those blue dots there, the two bottom of the blue dots, if you can see those are existing well sites that serve the North San Jose area. That one, yeah, thank you, those two. And the one a little bit to the north or up is the Agnews well site. So that's what we're looking at. And as our existing wells, which were put in about 40 years ago, as they are degrading and continue to grade, we need to look for more well sites to replace those and add, which two of them have already, we can't use for potable water. We can use them for non-potable, but the water coming out of them is not, we can't use it for direct potable, so we can't add it to your water supply. So that third well, that Agnews, is kind of tying in with how can we, knowing where San Francisco is and the scenario we are with drought, what can we do now to make sure that that water supply is there in a year from now and the next year to keep serving the existing community. Those stars on there, though, that's different. Those are new developments that have come to us and said, hey, they want to develop and they're going to use more water. And we have been telling them that they need to set aside land for new wells to serve, at a minimum, to serve their uses. That star on the far right, you may recognize that property right now. That is farmland at the corner of Sealy and Montague. We're working with that developer now. That's right next to Iris Chang, by the way. We're working with that developer now. They are setting aside land, and they're planning documents for a well that would serve their uses at a minimum. There's other ones in there too at the bottom. There at the bottom, that's just as an example, is Apple. When Apple came in, their development permit conditioned that they set aside a plot of land for a well site. It's not specific exactly where in their development they're going to put it, but it's a requirement that they have to set aside a well site to serve their water usage at a minimum. And also too, you may have heard of a data center up in north of 237 off of Zanker. The Microsoft would like to put a data center in. They're looking at that. We've also conditioned that development too to put a well site in so that they, just like the other ones, they're not going to connect to the drinking water system that we have now and take water away from you all. So we're, at the same time that we're working on well sites to make sure that your water supply is reliable, we're also making sure new developments are doing their fair share.
So I just want to ask real quickly. So those blue dots, are they, oh, nope, the slide disappeared. Sorry, okay. So the blue dots, are you saying that those are existing wells now, or, because I thought the Agnews was not an existing well site. So I'm trying to figure out what I do with the blue dots.
Thank you. Yeah. So those are the two bottom ones are existing well sites.
Okay.
The blue dots were more to signify those are the well sites that are going to be serving you, versus the red squares are the well sites that new developers have to set aside land for wells that serve themselves.
I have a question. So in reading the EIR and the initial study for the groundwaters well, I understand there you have already two wells that you haven't used. And I don't know if that's for this overall city of San Jose, but in North San Jose, we are, and let's say, for instance, we got cut off by, totally cut off by Het Hetchy. Is there not enough water for the existing people? We're probably about 12,000 people right now. Is there not enough water that you can't, at least if you wanted to do wells immediately, could you not start with well number 5 on Trimble? And then down the line, while we're working with the park, we can figure out where the other wells will go if we, if you need that, those other 2 wells, because you've already got 2 that you haven't already used. And then the number 5, which is on Trimble, that should be easy to build, because you're right next to I believe a water tank anyway. So why not start with that one first? And if it's such a emergency, because we're only, like I said, even if Het Hetchy cut us off and we had to use San Jose water or those other 2 existing for emergency, it should be able to take care of at least 12,000 people, because that's what we are right now. Start with well number 5 first, and let us give us time to work with the park and the other wells.
A very good question, and thanks. And I'll jump maybe to this next part here and to answer that. That graphic that pop.
That one
back,
or
please.
no, back.
Back up. So there's. there's a red oval that next, there you go. Thank you. So there's a red oval that popped up there. We've been looking at groundwater wells in the North San Jose area, how to solve the San Francisco issue and new development for many years. And one of the steps that we've done is have a hydrology study done. So we had someone come in and look at the groundwater basin to look to see where the most, because the groundwater basin isn't equal everywhere. There's some areas that have much higher potential for groundwater in a single location than others. The consultant that we hired, the study that we did, identified that the red dashed circle, approximately bordering Coyote Creek from about Montague up to Tasman, as high producing capacity area of the groundwater basin. That has to go with how the East Foothills eroded millennial ago and left pockets of gravel as it eroded over millions of years. That area, based on their studies, it has higher pockets of gravel, meaning, well, it's considered a high production zone. What that means for you and for me. So I'm your water provider. So the groundwater wells, everything that we're talking about, is paid for by your water bills, to be blunt. And so obviously, one of our main focuses is safe, reliable water supply, but we really have another one. It is to try to keep water rates as low as possible and as affordable as possible. So in any project that we do, this one and all of them, we're always looking for projects that get the most bang for the buck. Based on this report, that well 5 is actually a lower producing zone of the aquifer. This area here that we're looking at, Agnews, in the area of our 2 existing wells, is a very high producing area. And what that means in terms of money and maybe water rates is that if we can spend the same amount of money and get double the amount of water out of the ground, that cuts the cost in half. So we can go put other wells in, for example, other places, but we may have to put in 6 wells or 8 wells where we can maybe get out of 2 wells or 3 wells in this zone. And so that all, for us, it looks at, because all of this comes from water rates and your bills is what's paying for it. So what we're looking at here is, what can we do? What is the most efficient from a money perspective? What can we do to put something in that serves you right now as cheaply and as efficiently as possible? So, there are some other questions too, like why here? Why are we looking at here? And it's really because we're really zoning in on this area of really good pockets of gravel where we can hopefully get away with putting in a couple wells that will serve this entire area, and not a couple wells, and that would then therefore have a smaller impact on water rates versus having to do many more. And the other one too, I should add, why specifically this location? Right there in Zanker and approximately Tasman, that is our key water transmission infrastructure. So the closer we can get to that intersection with the well, such as this one on Agnews, why it's really ideal, I think, for us as your water provider, from reliable, but also keeping water rates low, is that we're literally right next door to this key infrastructure. What that means is less money that we have to spend to get water from a well to our main transmission mains. It just, at the end of the day, it just means less money for everybody and less cost. And I'm sorry for being blunt here, but it is your water rates that pay for it. And so if we can get it done as cost efficiently as possible, that helps to keep your water rates as affordable as possible.
Well, the Trimble site really got high ratings, and that it was easy to put in and start faster than the other three over on Agnews, because you don't know, because you need, I guess you need to drill to see just what the quality of the water is. Is that what I've heard before, you know, or what you need to do, or, but anyway, so it just made sense that number 5, it's going to be there anyway. I mean, that's the four locations, 3 on Agnews and 1 on Trimble. So it tells me that they're all 4 of equal, and that start with number 5 first. And I mean, it didn't say anything about the water not being not good or brackish or anything like that. It included it in the other 3, which is supposed to be very good also. And the fact that it will pump, I think you wanted, I forgot what the number you needed, but it pumps about the same as what the new ones you expect to have on the Agnews Park. I mean, if it wasn't that great, they should never put it in, is what I'm saying. So if it's good, then let's use that one first.
Jeff, if I could offer this conversation is important, and it's getting technical, and I think it might be good for your team to receive that input and maybe report out. I think it's hard to capture and resolve this.
Sure. I mean, obviously, we want to take the comments back and see what we can do. But I feel also too that I want to make sure that I'm not making any misleading statements, and that in that area there. I mean, it's water. There is water there, but what we're specifically looking at, Gina, I want to be just really like as clear as I can, and hopefully I'm not, miscommunicating. What we're really looking at is adding a certain amount of water supply. It's not all these well sites are not equal. The ones in this zone that we're looking at are higher producing. So we could put 1 in now and get the capacity of having to do Trimble and another. And to be blunt, doing 1 Trimble doesn't offset losing San Francisco. In order to replace losing San Francisco Hetch Hetchy water supply, we need at least two high producing, or perhaps 4 Trimbles as an example, or 2 in Agnews. I think that was one of the questions of what would be done if we had to, in water supply, groundwater, to replace San Francisco, and it would be about 2 Agnews running all the time, which is not ideal. There's San Francisco, by the way, I mean, they're indicating that it'd be reductions of up to 50% in a drought year. So we're not, I don't want to say, oh, we got to go replace them now. No, that's not the case. What we're really looking at is trying to replace about half of San Francisco. So that would be, to give you a number, that would be like a 2,500 gallon per minute well, just to give you throw a number out there. When we looked at Trimble, that would be somewhere around a 1,200 gallon a minute well, that area. So all that we could do it, but that's not going to help with our water supply. I just want to make sure I'm throwing that out there. We can go back and relook at the numbers and see maybe something else can be done. But I mean, our focus is to get a groundwater well at 1 or 2 in order to help offset the drop in water supply if we have issues in getting the water supply right now from San Francisco. And that's
Jeff,
that's what we're looking at.
Hang
Can
on,
I just ask-
I just want to, there's one thing you said, Jeff, about, you said we need to get it in now. What do you mean by now, when you say you need to get the well in now? What timeline are you on?
Oh, so these things take time. These take, I mean, we've been looking at, I know that it's a little bit late, perhaps getting to this group and having this discussion, but we've been looking at Agnews and a well for about 4 years. And we started doing pilot wells out there 2.5 years ago. And so our timeline going forward, it's the change in San Francisco, I'm sorry, the change in the Bay Delta plan and the restrictions being imposed on San Francisco, that's all what came about this year, and the drought. And so because of that, we're looking at a year. It'll take us about a year to get a well in and connected. So you can't do them overnight. And so in the scenario that I mean, it's a good question. And what we're looking at is that we have to keep moving. We have to keep taking steps, at least to start with one. I mean, in order to really, from our perspective, to keep your water supply as reliable and consistent as possible in major drought scenarios, knowing what we know out of San Francisco, we need about 2 in Agnews that are ideally producing around 2,500 gallons a minute. If we did 1, that's great. But we'd really have to kind of see then how things go with San Francisco, and we just have to kind of gauge what we're going to ask of the community to cut back as we keep looking for more well sites. So it is right now, I think, for us as your water provider, it is to get something in the ground, and it takes a year to do it, to keep taking the steps, working with you all, working with parks, keep taking the steps and try to get one in.
So my
Hey,
next
Judge
question,
Phelps,
hang on a second. Hang on. This is our meeting. Hang on.
Yeah, Gene
My
Muller.
next question,
Yeah,
my next
Gene.
question is for Nicole, and that's what's your timeline, Nicole? Because
Yeah.
we hear that the park is needing all this time and you want to work together with Muni Water. And what bothers us is that Muni Water is going to be driving the design of the park if they've got a well in within 12 months. And the park isn't doing anything because they're still conceptually thinking about things.
Yeah, and I that is not an inaccurate statement. They are moving. Muni has needs and is on a schedule that is faster than the park can support. And that's just a fact.
Oh, so we don't.
So
So-
really, when you sit here and tell us that maybe we can move things here and maybe we can move things there, and you're considering the design, the truth is that Muni Water is going to determine what's fixed and what's not, and it's not the parks that determines it.
I think that's one way of looking at it. Yes. I think one of the things we're trying to convey with this presentation tonight is the idea that we believe we have a lot of flexibility in the park, right? And that we have a lot of opportunity. And so even if Muni fixes well locations, because they're moving forward at a different speed, we think we've got enough flexibility with the park layout and design, and that there is enough area here that we can work with it.
Okay, so right now I'm like really mad because I specifically asked about why the wells were going down along, I don't know what road it is, as opposed to going across the top of the drawing. And you said, well, that's something we can, figure out and change the layout. And yet what I'm really hearing now, according to Muni, is that no, those wells are going to be there regardless of what you guys want to do. This is where we're putting them, and we're starting next year. And we're just, blowing smoke at you guys right now. That's what I'm hearing. And it's really irritating because we keep saying, do we have these options? Do we have input? And it sounds like we don't really have input, that these things are locked in place.
And I think I need to leave it to Jeff to talk about, whether we have any flexibility with well placements. I think what we believe is
You can keep going.
flexibility. We have flexibility for sure with park yard placement, with community center placement, any of the assets that we want to put on the site. And so if it makes sense for the community and for the well site to move the park yard around, in a different configuration, because that's what's going to work better, we have that flexibility.
But the wells aren't moving. The wells are where they're going to be, is what I'm hearing.
Well, I think I need Jeff to comment on that, whether he's got any flexibility.
I don't think it's here.
This started out with just a well or wells, and then it's now the park yard. And, we don't know what more is going to come down the line, but I can understand maybe try one well, but if they have, if this is an emergency and everybody's scared, we can probably work with, and I need to talk with, make sure my neighbors all feel the same way too. And maybe one well, if he needs a high performance well for emergency. But as far as 3, that's going to be a real big issue with us and our parks. If they have to get started, and the fact that you don't want to do anything on Trimble because it doesn't produce the high capacity that you need. But as I said before, between Alviso and us, we're only about 12,000 people, and and if you're going to cut, if the San Francisco water district cuts us off, or half anyway, there's still enough water for us that we don't need to be rushing as if the barn's on fire.
So
Can I ask a question? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about what the city process is from here going forward? I know we're getting close to wrapping up the environmental. Are there other approval steps where there's community participation between now and shovels starting to dig?
Well, this is just the environmental. The next would be the next step would be to do a single well in a location. So ideally, in these discussions, this one or perhaps another one, we would really like to nail down at least one. I mean 3. So the environmental actually called out squares, that environmental review, but we could change that. It wouldn't be that much time to move maybe 2 of those squares around to another area. And if what we're looking at here is 1, I mean, preferably 2, but if it's 1 well is all that, that I think together that we're comfortable with, then that's something that we'll take and we'll do. We can do 1, and then the other 2, we'd have to modify the environmental review, which wouldn't be that significant. And we can move that around at a later date. So we could get away with 1.
So I'm a little concerned that the environmental review, multiple places in its responses to the community, said certain questions were out of scope. But it doesn't sound like there's another opportunity for us to get those questions answered if this is the last step before starting to dig the wells, or the last approval step, community step, council step before starting to dig the wells.
That would be, so, I mean, that would be correct in that I don't think we would come back with an item for discussion and normally. And so that's right. So, I mean, this would be something that we'd want to, I think, come away from this meeting or set up another meeting to continue to discuss it, come away with where that 1 could be. I think if we were to flip back maybe and look at that park layout, if that 1 at the top corner.
Yeah, so I'm talking a little less about the number of wells and where the wells are located, as much as process and the fact that the community asked a bunch of questions that the environmental report didn't answer because it said it was out of scope for the environmental report. But it doesn't seem like we've got another mechanism for getting those answers for the community.
Oh, I'd have to go back and see what those questions were to that. Yeah. And
Okay,
we could, I'm not sure if there was a response. I guess it sounds like there wasn't a response then
yeah,
from
the responses basically said out of scope for an environmental report, so no responses needed. And there were at least a half a dozen of those in the responses back to the community.
Well, Jeff, the long-term plan is for 3 wells. Was there a cost benefit to trying to do 3 wells at one time, or was the idea that they could be built 1 at a time and it's not really going to be a major cost impact to do 1 and wait on the rest?
Great question. No, so the way it works with parks, we've learned over the years, I mean, once it's dedicated as a park, we can never go back in and do a well. So the goal of doing the environmental review now was to help support the park development so that they would be in there as future well sites. That what changed for us though was the current water supply conditions. Absolutely. We're not intending to do 3 now. Maybe I should have been more clear on that. Our intention is not to do 3 now. It was to do 1, is what we started out with. Do 1 now, and then work on. But the with the changes over the past 8 months with San Francisco and the state, that's what kind of led us into, oh, we probably should go for 2 now, is what we should be doing. But our intention before this was really to move forward with 1 and phase them in over the next 10 years.
So if we, I mean, ultimately, the big concern from my perspective, isn't really what we're spending this hour talking about. The big concern from my perspective is when we can even get this park built, right? There's a lot of hurdles that are going to come as far as funding this park and getting the park built. And so, getting the money for the park, getting the park plan done, getting the park built, to me, should be the priority of the community. From my office's perspective, expediting the resources to get the master plan done for the park is priority number 1. And figuring out how to get that done is going to be something, and being creative about finding the resources for that is going to be something I'm going to be focused on for the next few months. So if we can figure out a way to do that so that site number 1 for your well gets locked in now, but the other 2 sites for the wells get baked into that master planning process, which means that those 2 sites are a little bit flexible as we plan out the master plan for the park. Maybe that's the way to go. That will actually, help with this process. We have to lock in 1 site, but we work on those other 2. Since it's a 10-year process for those other 2 wells, and the master plan and the designing of the park is also going to be a several-year process, we can probably coordinate the other 2 sites in a little bit of a longer term. That park yard is also not an immediate thing. From what I hear, the idea of putting the park yard in that corner was mainly to camouflage the location of those wells more than it was because that park yard had to be in that corner. But if we're only going to locate 1 well, that park yard is certainly flexible too when it comes to master planning the park. So nothing is set in stone in that design. And I think I just want to be clear, because we've talked about this in our office with the Parks Department. The layout of those blocks was only there to show you just how massive this park site is. And I want you to all understand, we've looked at park sites around the city when we've talked about how big this Agnews park site is. This is a massive park site. There is no community center library site in the city as big as what was shown in that block. And as a library commissioner for 5 years, who was fortunate enough to be there for the ribbon cutting of all the new libraries in the city, we opened the Almaden Library Community Center. I was there for the opening of the Bascom Library Community Center. None of those buildings are as big as what was shown as a potential site on your Agnews Park. All of those blocks were huge park site blocks. You're going to have a lot of potential, and it will take years to have the resources to build all of those things. So you're going to have a lot of resources when this is done. So my intention, is that we're going to, get a master plan done soon so that we can see it in where the real locations will be. The drawing was only there to show you just how much fits, not where it's going to go. The only reason why that park yard was in the corner was just because that's where the wells were put. But we can start with 1 well. Is that possible, Nicole and Jeff, that those wells, other 2 wells, could be flexible as far as location?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that's a solution at this point, is to say, look, we're going to sacrifice 1 location for 1 well at this point, just to get a secure water supply for your part of San Jose. Move forward with that. Work with our office to try to expedite that master plan so we can figure out where the rest of the park layout will be. That will be a community-based process, so you'll all be part of figuring out where everything's located and then work from there. Does that sound like a process we can live with moving forward?
Are you asking us, or are you asking the?
No, now I'm asking you as a community,
I think that's fine. One of our biggest concerns is that, we have seen various departments say dibs on this park, and yet nothing happening. And that's why we get very defensive, because everyone looks at that big empty spot and they say, we want a slice.
So I agree with Dick Santos, and I think that if he's got a a yard already in existence or close by, then that's where that should be. That allows us, I know you want to camouflage the wells, but I think that if there's already something existing, then that should be where the yard should be, or at least looked into. Also, too, is come August the 24th, this goes before the city council, the initial study of the Trimble Agnews municipal groundwater wells and all the documents that goes with it. So I would like to have that. I would like to have part of it changed where it's that you're going to do one well on the Agnews Park, but possibly if you need the others, then that might come into play. And not to say that all 3 wells is definitely going to be on Agnews Park. That's how I feel about that.
Hey, David, I can live with that, what you propose.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I think Richard's proposal about looking at other sites is a good creative solution. We'll certainly talk with environmental services, but I do want to, make sure everyone understands that, that's not PRNS property. That is a different purpose site, and that, we also are looking at what's the ideal location for where PRNS will have to deploy their vehicles for maintaining all the parkland in North San Jose. And, it is about being close and to all the different parks and being able to maintain the parks. And again, we'll look at that, but it's not, I don't want to, we're not going to promise, but certainly it's worth looking into whether that's going to be a reasonable solution for PRNS and where their yard can go. So certainly it should be looked into as a possible option. I do want to say that, just mentioning, since we're talking about parks, and I'll mention this other thing, we're going to continue to expand parkland in North San Jose as we develop, move on with other developments in North San Jose. There's the River Oaks Park that at the end of River Oaks over by First Street, and I've been making sure that we're setting aside land as we expand VTA property development and the property south of there to expand the length of River Oaks Park along the Guadalupe River, so that it'll be a much bigger park eventually. So we'll need more maintenance for that area. It'll be a huge park when that's done eventually.
That's called, David, that's called Riverview Park.
Riverview Park, I'm sorry. So Riverview Park, and the extent, my intention is that we will expand Riverview Park along Guadalupe River all the way south to Montague. It'll be a much longer park when it's done eventually. And then, so we're going to work on making sure we have much more park space in North San Jose and other locations as well. And then I also want to just mention that this year we have funding to reinstate the community garden in Alviso for all of you who might be interested in getting space there. So hopefully by the spring next year, we'll have that back up and running. So you'll be able to have access to space for a community garden in the North San Jose Alviso area.
And Dick, I also wanted to mention, since we've got Nicole on the line too, that Nicole and I have been talking for a number of weeks. My video camera's screwing up here. About going back and reevaluating and going through the Alviso master plan for that park, Alviso Park master plan that the community did, I don't even know how many years ago, and really start prioritizing some projects as some work gets done there.
It was completed in November of 1998.
I think there was
get somebody's attention, but everybody keeps on talking. Just a couple of comments, please. I really appreciate anybody trying to get wells to augment water supply. But what I don't understand is when we in the Valley Water and everyone else was raising the yellow flag up, San Francisco didn't do a damn thing. And they still haven't really made anything about water restriction, whatever have you. But it's good to plan because wells are good to augment. But here's the deal. If it was so important, where was everybody when they built that school on Agnew? I was there and said, where is your purple pipe? You're a mile away from recycling. Why don't you put your bathrooms and your landscaping on purple pipe? They chose not to. It doesn't even make sense. Where was the city of San Jose? You're supposed to be partners in this thing. The other issue, when you have Microsoft going to come over across from 237, you got a recycling plant. So make sure they hook up there, David, so you don't use domestic water for landscaping or bathrooms. It doesn't even make sense. If it don't make sense, it's nonsense. And half this stuff can be worked out with just common sense. So when Gene says put a well over in Tremble, I guess around Sealy, I used to work that as a child. I worked over there. That was the Pace Ranch, and we sharecropped it. There's plenty of water over there. I understand all that, but water's got to be used for drinking, not to be put in landscaping and bathrooms. And so you guys have opportunity to do those things. I don't know why you're going for. I know the mayor did not want to support Purple Pipe, and they didn't want to get an ordinance here for North First Street with Purple Pipe. Well, I hope you will all change your mind with the deciding votes today and take charge and get recycling water so we don't have to go dry. If everybody doesn't chip in, and by the way, when you put these wells in, you got to make sure we're not taking all the aquifers and taking all the water. Because we have pride in our recharge programs. It's the best in the nation, thanks to Valley Water. They've done a great job in recharge, but all of us got to stick together and not suck these places dry. So just putting a well in is not necessarily the answer. It's how you monitor and how you go about it. So Gene's suggestion of putting one in, if that's the case, to experiment, what's wrong with that? You can find out the noise level, if it's good, if it's bad, then you go on to other things instead of putting all 4 or 5 in. But I don't knock anybody for trying to get wells from the city to augment because we need water. You can live without electricity, but you can't live without water. There's a lot of common sense issues that can be done here, and I hope you all would consider those things. When you say, well, you know, don't get your mind made about 2,600 acres over the treatment plant, why not? That's land that is owned by the city of San Jose. It's been sitting there since I was a kid when I played there in 1955. So I don't understand those things. You're trying to take valuable space and misuse it when you have opportunities to do the right thing. If we all work together, this can all be done properly. But this school was not planned properly because I was there at those meetings and I said to the board of the trustees, why aren't you plumbing this thing properly? And there's what you call politics. And you would have saved the taxpayer $10 million over the next 50 years. But here we go again. So I think what Gene Marlowe has been trying to do is saying, you know, let's be reasonable. And I appreciate all you guys trying to get water sources. But it's really funny because San Francisco hadn't said a word. And you're right, though, Jeff. We're not going to get 55% allocation. It's going to be below that if we're lucky if we get that. And then we're going to rely on recharge water. And there's where you got to use those wells. If you do that, please be careful because sucking this thing dry, then we have no water. And once we use all the recharge water, you tell me where it's going to come because we ain't got none. So I was on several meetings today, about 8 hours over trying to transfer and buy water. We're trying to hook up right now to Contra Costa. And price, I don't know why people are worried about price. You're going to pay. But you'll pay more in damage control if you don't settle these things now and do it right. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions? Anything?
Okay.
David, thank you very much. You made some really good suggestions. And thank you, Jeff. And you, Hughes, is that his name? Why?
Eves.
Eves. I'm sorry.
Eve, just one of me.
Eve. I'm sorry, Eve.
Yeah,
just one.
Eve.
Sorry.
Thank you. And Hugo and Nicole and Michelle. Is that Michelle? Michael?
Michelle.
Oh,
Michelle.
yeah. Thank you, everybody. Any other questions before I close out? Excellent meeting. And we recorded this, so if you need anything.
I just want to thank you, Gene, for letting us continue this conversation. And, you know, we appreciate it. And I understand, you know, the concern from the community. I really do. And I appreciate how invested you are in this future park space, right? It means a lot to us. We don't get to build out park spaces this large very often. So
No.
it's nice to have a community that's so engaged, and we really do appreciate it.
Well, we consider this to be a regional park, and because it's so large, and when you have a regional park, you really want it to make it shine. We've got approximately 24,000 units coming down the line in the future, and it has to be a there. And our little park over, even it's 5 acres, but over at River Oaks, it's so crowded. The kids, you know, they're all waiting turns to play on the.
Have you guys in the Parks Department gone by in the evenings and looked at, I mean, it is, I'm so
it's
proud
packed.
of it because, you know, that's another park we fought really hard for. And I don't know if there's another park in the city. I'm probably just being vain, but I don't know that there's another park in the city that is getting as used and as well loved
Yeah.
as that park.
One thing,
It's super popular.
yeah, one thing we do need to consider is a dog park for the new park, because with the River Oaks, everybody has their dog running around, and you know, it's like maybe, I don't know, 12 dogs running around, and around 6 o'clock, and so some of the kids are being bitten and that sort of thing. So we need to protect the children, but that's something down the line. And Jeff, I really appreciate you being open-minded, and one well, you know, that's great if we can get started that way. So it's, at least it's not 3 right now. It's just too much. And so that's all I have to say. I talked a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
And anybody
Have a
else?
safe vacation, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike?
Happy anniversary to your in-laws.
Yeah. Mike, you got any questions before we sign off?
No, I really appreciate the support that we've been getting from the city on this issue and the other related issues. And I also want to say that I appreciated the idea of sharing between the maintenance lot and the wells. I thought that was potentially, if we do have a lot there, a good solution.
Yeah. So, okay. Good night,
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.